Hey, I'm Mark,
And I'm Craig.
and this is Songwriters Tales. Craig, another artist series today. This guy, Michael Peterson, I have followed his career probably since the early 90s, but uh, he is everything I thought he was going to be and 10,000 times more.
More.
Um, what can we say about this guy, Craig?
Well, I've got his bio pulled up in front of me because it's so long that my brain can't hold it all.
Take a deep breath.
I'm trying. Okay, so this man, Michael Peterson, has had 6 music publishing deals, 9 number one songs on charts around the world, 8 books as a contributing author, co-author, or author, 10 record deals, 18 times, Mark, songs hit number one on charts around the world. Okay, 22 different countries as a performer. This man has done video projects. He's 41 recorded songs by other artists like Travis Tritt, John Barry, people like that. Now, I want to tell you, one of the things that we discuss on this podcast with him is how much time he has spent with our military veterans. He has traveled extensively all over the world in battle zones and provided comfort
Mm.
and support for the troops. And that alone will make this podcast be worth the price of admission, my man. What do you
You
say?
are not kidding. Let's do it. Hey, it's Mark. Welcome back to Songwriters Tales. And Craig, this is fun for me because I've followed this guy for a long time, both as a songwriter and as an artist. So it's a thrill for me to welcome Michael Peterson to the show. And Craig, why don't you give the man a little bit of your magic, and we'll get into this.
I will be happy to. Michael, thank you for coming on, man. We are
My
so
pleasure.
excited.
My pleasure.
Just to let our listeners know, we're going to bring up the name of Rex Benson again. Rex introduced us, and Rex is in Nashville right now, so he's doing his thing out there. And I just want to just say, Michael, of course, we knew your songs. And as I went to your bio because I didn't know everything about you and I wanted to know everything about you. And have you looked well, I'm going to say you have not read your bio lately because if you had, you would have probably canceled this podcast, said, I'm too exhausted. I just read my bio.
God, no
Is
kidding.
that Mark? Am I lying?
No.
So would you mind give us a brief background on for those that might not know you, who you are, where you're from,
Sure.
your journey that brought you here. Talk to us.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, as a kid, I loved a lot of things, but music was one thing that I loved probably more than anything else. And in my early 20s, as I looked at the newspaper and the want ads for employment, I knew without any question that there was nothing there for me. That was my destiny. I was destined to do music. I started writing songs when I was probably 13 or 14. I had a difficult home life as a kid. Father was murdered. Stepfather committed suicide.
Gosh.
A lot of marriages and divorces in my family. A lot of other stuff that's uncomfortable to talk about necessarily. But um, I'm saying all of that to say this. I think when I found myself as a freshman in my freshman year of college, and I heard a record by a guy named Dan Fogelberg called Netherlands,
Yeah.
and that album, after I had just buried my adoptive dad 3 months ahead of that album spoke to me in such a deep, profound way that
Mm.
I thought this idea occurred to me. Maybe I could make music that could express myself the way that this guy Dan Fogelberg did. So I bought a guitar from a football player teammate of mine, and they had an open mic at the kind of lounge at the university I went to, and every Wednesday night or Thursday night, whatever it was, there was an open mic, and So I just started writing things and getting up and playing. So, it was just like the way it starts for most people is you just start where you are, And as I was growing up as a kid, some people loved different artists and they emulated them. I never really emulated any artists. I was always interested in who the songwriters were. So there was just this thing about me and
Interesting.
songwriting. So
Mm.
um, from those days till now, I'm 66 now. So 18 years old or so, started really like going after it. Um, I just have never wavered in my passion for the craft of songwriting. And I read every book that was available to me for all of those decades when, the only people that liked my songs were my friends and they had to or the beer stayed in the refrigerator. And I went down on the streets of Seattle and I did busking and I played every chance I could. And while my friends would be out partying, I'd be sitting listening to a James Taylor record, trying to figure out how he made those sounds, or a
Yeah.
Jim Croce record, or a Dan Fogelberg record, or a Gordon Lightfoot record, or I really loved singer-songwriters. So, um, in my mid 20s, a guy that I played football with in college ended up marrying a pop star, a gal named Denise Williams.
Yeah.
Some of your listeners might remember her from songs like "Too Much, Too Little, Too Late" with Johnny Mathis, or
Hmm.
"Let's Hear It for the Boy," which was a
Gosh,
band
yeah.
for her. So anyway, he married her. This guy that I played football with married her,
About
and
that.
he had at that time I was traveling around the country in my early 20s. Was traveling around the country with a group of athletes doing exhibitions for high school students, and on Sundays I'd be in churches, and I just thought I should ask these people in these churches if they mind if I also sing instead of just come to speak. So they said, yes, there's no problem if you come and sing. So I thought I need to make a record. And the only guy I knew that knew how to anything about records was this guy that I went to college with because he worked at a record company. So he made this record for me. And long story short is a couple of years later, he marries Denise Williams and she says, "Hey, what do you know about music?" And he said, "Well, I produced a record, but he only ever produced one." So he played her my record and she loved it. And at that time, Let's Hear It for the Boy had just finished its gigantic swing across the world as the biggest pop song in the world. Footloose, the soundtrack, 10 million albums sold,
It
all of
was
Yeah.
that.
huge.
So she decided she wanted to start a production company and do a record deal with a gospel label. So they signed me as their first artist, and so they became my first manager, my first publisher, and my first record deal was through them. So I ended up co-writing a bunch of songs with her, four of which ended up on albums of hers. And I was off to the races thinking I was going to be a pop and R&B writer, even though I didn't grow up necessarily listening to pop and R&B.
Hmm.
And one day a friend of mine said, "Hey, why are you writing all this pop and R&B and gospel music? I mean, that's fine, but like, look at you in your cowboy boots and your hat. Like, what?" And at the time that all of that was happening, grunge music was taking over the airwaves in top 40.
Yeah.
And so the artists that I grew up loving, the singer-songwriters, the only place I could find anywhere on the radio that sounded anything remotely like them was country.
Yeah,
And
that's
so I
right.
just thought, maybe, so a friend of mine one day said to me, "Hey, you should go to Nashville." And I thought, okay. So I went. So off I went to Nashville, and my one of my first visits there, I met by chance a guy who was a VP at BMG, and he said to me over a very short meeting in his office where I thought I was going to play a song for him. He said, "No, don't take your guitar out. I just not why I brought you here." I thought, okay, well, what am I here for? And he said, "How often do you come here?" And I said, a couple times a year." And he looked me in the eye and he said, "That's not enough." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, this is a 10-year town and no one will take you serious if you're not here on a regular basis." So he said, if you'll be serious about coming here on a regular basis, I'll see if I can help you." So I went home and I figured out a way. And for the next 2.5 years, I went a week a month to Nashville from Seattle. And during that time, I did all the things that, I knew to do, which was I didn't know what to do, but when I'd get to town, I'd go to Kroger's and pick up a Nashville scene and I'd find where all of the rooms were where
Hmm.
people were playing. And I'd be there for a week and I would immerse myself in every opportunity. But the one thing I didn't do was I didn't get up and play very many places. In fact, I don't know if I played any places my first year or so, because I just had a feeling like it's not a good idea to show what you've got if you don't know what everybody else in the room has got,
Hmm.
right? Because you only get one chance to make a first impression. So, anyway, in hindsight, I think that was a good decision. But about a year and a half in, I finally felt brave enough to get up and play some of my stuff, and then things started to unfold. And one day, long story, fun story for another podcast, but I met the president of EMI Music, and she offered me a publishing deal, and I went home and packed up my stuff and moved to Beverly. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
I landed
buddy.
in Nashville. And the week that I got to Nashville, she got fired, and my attorney told me not to sign the deal. So now I've moved my family to Nashville. I thought I had a deal with EMI. My attorney says don't do that deal because I think you can do better. But now I need a job, so I get a job working at the BP on Belmead as a cashier from midnight to 7 a.m. And I do this because I think to myself, I feel like I'm so close to something great happening. I need a job. I'd never worked as a cashier at a convenience store, but I needed something I could do at night because I knew I didn't need to sleep because nobody needs to sleep really, right? So I figured I could work all night and I could work all day. So I thought between 3 and about 5 or 6 in the morning, there's not going to be hardly anybody in there. So I can bring a guitar. And so I would sit behind the cash register from 3 to 5 or so in the morning and I would work on songs. And my friends would ask me, do you have a publishing deal? And I'd say, yeah. And they say, well, who are you writing for? I'd say, I write for BP. And they say, what's BP? And I said, British Publishing. And they're paying me $7.50 an hour to write songs. So while I was there, I started to write what became my first big hit, Drinks, Swear, Steal, and Lie. Sitting behind the cash register, trying to play this little bluegrass thing, watching the guy fill up the gas tanks outside. And so all of that was, 4 months go by, and I ended up getting a deal with Warner Chappell. And within 6 months, I had a record deal with Warner Brothers Records. And within 6 months of that, my first single came out and went to number 3 on Billboard, uh, number 1 on CMT, and we were off to the races. So I know that's a long story, but that's kind of my
That's
journey.
awesome.
Was a lot of sit around, hurry up and wait. But the one thing I did, I think, was really, in hindsight, a smart thing. I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I always, if you use this metaphor of a sailboat, I always kept my sail up. Even when the wind
Hmm.
wasn't blowing, I always kept my sail up. So when opportunities came, I was ready. The second thing I think I did that really helped me, if anybody's listening and was looking for some encouragement, is I just didn't quit. Most people just give up. I just didn't quit. I just stayed and kept growing little by little. And now that's been, I don't know, I'm 66 now. I was 36 when I went to Nashville. I was
30
10 years
years.
too old at that time. And I've never had another job. I never had to go do something else. Somehow I've found a way with all the ups and downs. And I think it has to do with whatever your calling is. Like for me, this has been a calling. And that's why I think after all these years, it hasn't wavered. It's a calling for me. I love it.
I first off, you and I are brothers from another mother because that's the reason why I started listening to country music because I was also a Seeger freak and a Dan Fogelberg freak
Yeah.
and I did not like grunge. And so if anybody's listening to this that liked grunge, no, no, sorry. It did
Yeah.
not appeal to me in the least. And I gravitated to Nashville and started listening and again, I like the artist, but I was like you, I'm looking on the back saying, "God, who wrote that song?"
Yeah.
And and I kept seeing Hugh Prestwood and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then so I quickly learned who the best writers in town were.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the artists, but to me, the writers were the
Yeah.
my heroes.
What years were you
And
there?
we started
In the
probably
90s,
yeah, it was in the 90s,
early 90s.
probably early to mid 90s. So
Okay. I just
but
wonder if we were there at the same time.
yeah, we probably
Yeah.
were, but
Yeah.
man, that story about writing songs in a BP. That's a song. If you haven't written it, you need to.
Oh.
So
Well,
That's
the
great.
funny thing is it sometimes it's so easy to get discouraged in this business, you know. And my first number one song that I ever wrote was a song that I'd had for 10 years. I'd written it. It was during my, my gospel years. I was writing and not much was happening. And I'd pitched it everywhere. And I was literally, guys, I had just taken my physical exam to join the police department in Seattle. I was ready to give up. And my phone rang, and it was Bill Gaither's office calling from
Ooh,
Indiana. And they said, was Michael Peterson there? Yeah. I said, well, who's this? They said, well, we're calling because this group, the Imperials, you remember the gospel quartet, the
I
Imperials?
Of
do.
course. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
Absolutely.
Imperials are making a new record, and they have one of your songs and they want to record it. Is that okay with you? And I'm like, first of all, I didn't know how they would have ever gotten it. But so I said, well, yeah, sure. So they sent me the paperwork. I got to keep my publishing. It became the first single off their last major label record, an album called Stir It Up, and it became a number one song. And I realized a lesson from that. I'd been a hit songwriter for 10 years. I just didn't know it,
Great,
So good,
great
man.
point, man.
That is
you
so
know?
good,
You know, um,
dude. Mm.
because Mark and I have done all kind of pitching, and we pitch it, and that's kind of sort of how I came in touch with Rex.
Yeah.
Just trying to
Yeah.
figure out, somebody to listen to songs here, and Tony Arata. I know you know Tony. He wrote "The Dance" for Garth and a bunch of
Sure.
other hits, and I came to know him way back shortly after he'd written those songs, and he told me about that song, how he had written "The Dance." He'd sit out on a back alley of his apartment, and he'd play that song for family and friends, and they'd all kind of go, "Oh, that's okay."
Mm. Yeah.
you know, and that's the thing. But you hit it, you nailed it, Michael. One of the reasons, and there's various reasons why Mark and I started this podcast, but I think, and Mark, I think you'll agree, the top priority is to encourage people who are in the business, whether they're songwriters or performers, to not give up. Exactly what you just said, because nothing happens the same for anybody. That's the thread that we've seen through all the people we've
Right.
talked with, from producers. Steve Dorff was on recently. So we've had all levels of people come on, but that right there is the thread, exactly what you said. And I want to just thank you. I appreciate you
Oh,
saying this might be an encouragement for some of you, because, you
It's
know,
an encouragement for me
it is. Mark and I talk about this all the
wow.
time.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so good to hear you say that. I
Well,
mean,
you
I
have
was hit.
something and nobody pays any attention to it. And it's easy to say to yourself, well, I guess I thought it was great, but I guess maybe it's not. And then one day somebody picks it up and sings it and it goes to number one and you realize, well, all these years I thought to myself, I didn't know how to do it. I did know how to do it. And maybe there's some other things in my cat that are great. And it just wasn't time.
Well, and the other thing I want to thank you for is how you mentioned that it was a calling for you, and for me personally, I don't know that I've actually accepted that for myself, that it's a calling. I've just always thought, well, I just like it. But I can see the compelling nature of this, man, of when you're writing songs. And the other thread that runs through our podcast with writers, and we're going to get to this. This is going to take us down a side road a little bit later on. We'll do it when you're ready. We know that you work a lot with the military, with projects on that level, and Mark and I do as well. So I'm going to swing back around, but one thing that Mark and I have learned, we're down at Zach Brown's place every month writing with the vets down there that he brings in. And we have learned the healing, and that music goes into a place in emotions and people. And you mentioned your background and your life story as a young man, some of the things that happened to you and all the tragedies, and music just has a way of somehow, it's a balm, and that's one of those things that only God knows how it works, because I
Yeah.
certainly don't know. I don't know how it
Yeah.
gets in there, and I don't know the chemistry behind it. But uh, that's one of the threads that we've seen
Well,
throughout
I,
the
I
throughout the
appreciate you
podcast.
saying that. And you're right on the money. I mean, I think that's maybe some of the common cloth that connects us all, you know?
Hmm.
And I remember one time I saw I saw this quote. I've never forgot it. It said, "What is a publisher?" It said, "A publisher is someone who's looking for someone who has something to say,
Wow.
It's so true. Book
right? So,
publishers, music publishers, it's so
right,
true.
right, right, right. So when you have tragedies in your life, you might have something to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So it's no surprise that you guys go and write with these vets and there's profound things because they have something to say. And they
Oh,
have
brother,
they
do
don't
they?
they're not just looking for a hook, you know, hey, I'm
No.
thinking about this. They have something to say. And
Yeah.
I think a big part of what makes a great song is woven into the DNA of it in ways that we can't hold in our hand is some kind of intention. And that
Mhm.
intention has energy, which people can feel even if they can't touch it. And there's something about that crossroad where that intention meets expert craftsmanship,
There you go.
right? That
Yeah.
turns this intention into um, a purpose. And when people hear
Mm.
this music, they feel this purpose, you know, and I just think that's a big part of it, you know. Um, so you know, take your tragedies and write about them. And even though I know we write to try to write universal themes and things, the thing is we're not really that much different from each other.
No. Well, I
Anyway,
think it
I
is
sort of went down a
universal.
rabbit
I
hole there,
mean,
but you know, I just
no,
wanted you to
but
know that. You
no,
know,
it's not a rabbit hole, and I think you nailed it. I think it is a universal thing. I mean, everybody's got pain in their life. I mean, my pain may start off as something other than your pain, but loss is loss. Heartache is heartache.
yeah.
Addiction is addiction. I mean, and we, from writing with the vets, Craig still gets to do it. I haven't been able to do it in a while, but he, it's like every time I hear a song that they wrote, man, I mean, you talk about, like you said, it's not even about the hook. It's about the emotion that came out. And when I was writing with the vets with Craig, I tell the story a couple of times. We were sitting with, and there was this one guy who was kind of quiet, wasn't saying much, and I thought, well, he's just not really into it, or he's just, kind of he's in a place that he doesn't want to deal with it. And so we just, we encourage, and then we come
Mhm.
back and to do the second session. And this guy, we're all struggling looking for something. What are we looking for? And this guy goes, well, what about this? And he just says this line, and it's like, well, there's the hook of the song. I mean, and it was so profound and it was simple, but it was like he was absorbing everything that we said. And he finally felt comfortable enough to talk about it.
Hey, everybody. Craig with Songwriters Tales with Mark and Craig. Just wanted to let you know episodes 25 and 26 are now out on YouTube and Spotify. You're going to want to check these out. This is Jamie O'Neill, a singer and a songwriter from Nashville who has had hits, and she's got a brand new album out. Check her out. Episodes 25 and 26.